almost kidnapped or worse in St. Lucia. So, I'll start off by saying that this story is pretty long, and is going to make my friend and I sound like complete fucking idiots. This is because we are. We completely ignored everything we've been ever told about stranger danger and basic safety. But hey, we're both 20-year-old college dudes. I'm also not the best writer, so bear with me. This happened last Sunday. My parents are pretty well off and love to travel to exotic destinations. They planned a trip to St. Lucia and extended an invitation to my sister, her boyfriend, and my friend Vince and I. St. Lucia is a small mountainous jungle island near the coast of Venezuela. It's a significantly underdeveloped nation with an all-cash economy where few taxes are collected and spent for the good of the commons. Violent crime on the island is not unheard of. There are a few paved roads, a few major favela-like towns, and a couple of small, secluded, high-end, boat-accessible resorts. We stayed at one of these resorts. My parents were in one room, and the rest of us stayed in a room next door. The rooms were more like little huts, open entirely to the outdoors, with easily accessible rooftops above and below. All was well for most of the trip. We went hiking, snorkeling, and relaxed on the beach. As much as my friend and I enjoyed it, this resort was meant for honeymooners, not for college kids looking to have a wild time. One night, Vince and I were drinking up late at the bar, which was not extremely lively as usual, and we get to talking with the bartender, Gustavo. We bond with Gustavo over our interest in Yeezy, Wheezy, and girls, and nothing seemed off at all. We asked him if he knew any clubs or where to have a good time in town. He told us about how we had to leave the resort to really experience the place as we expected. He offered to take us to his place sometime to show us the good time we've been looking for. He then showed us a picture of his house. This should have been the first red flag, but we're drinking and had no reason not to trust our new friend. Gustavo had a massive house for the standards that are around here, complete with a huge flat-screen TV, pool table, bar, and Camaro. We had been on the island for a bit at this point, and had not seen a car or a house half as nice as this. We told him we'd be interested, but would have to let him know when we can go later. The next day, we get a text from Gustavo midday saying that a boat was on deck to pick us up. This was strange to Vince and I since we had not agreed upon a time. We told him we had plans and couldn't go during the day anyways. This seemed to piss him off a little bit. The next day, whenever Vince or I would see Gustavo at the resort, he lacked enthusiasm and ignored us when we said hello to him. The following day, however, Gustavo was off work and were texting us like we were best friends again. He asked us if we would come to his place and told us he was making pizza and had girls lined up and some of that good. Knowing that my parents would never let me do something so risky, we told him that we can only go after 10 because my parents were most likely going to be asleep at that point. He agreed, but was kind of annoyed and made it sound like we owed him and we better not bail again. On a side note, I never done coke, but my friend Vincent has. I was slightly worried, but figured I'd just say no, like DARE taught me, or whatever, and still have a good time, right? Besides, we couldn't bail twice. As 10 o'clock rolled around, my parents had gone to sleep, my sister and her boyfriend had gone elsewhere, and Vincent and I finished up pre-gaming at the beach bar near the dock until it was closed for the night. It started getting very dark, and soon Vincent and I were about the only ones down at the dimly lit beach area. This is when things really start to get sketchy. Around 10:45, we get a call from Gustavo saying something along the lines of, "The plans have changed. The boat taxi is no longer being arranged through the resorts. My guy has come picking you up. The fare is gonna be more expensive now. Around $100 USD plus tip. He's nice, but he has a temper, and he's in a hurry, so don't piss him off. Look for the green and yellow boat and just get in." The unfamiliar flat and low tone of his voice that he had used sent chills down our spine, and suddenly we knew we were in serious trouble. We only had $140 on us altogether. We get another call saying, "My guy's gonna be a little late. He has some drop-offs to make. But if you're not at the dock when he gets there, he'll be knocking on room 17. Don't make him knock." Room 17 is the room my parents were staying in. Vincent is about to throw up at this point. Trying to stay calm, I suggest that we hide our phones and wallets nearby, just in case they try to mug us. There is nobody but us at the beach at this point. I could barely make out some small boats far out in the bay, but they hadn't moved in a while. We are standing on a small rock peninsula, at the side of a cliff, surrounded by black water with a single dim lamp overhead. We cannot run and we cannot hide. My parents and my sister and her boyfriend may be in serious danger if we do. 11:30 p.m., we get another call from Gustavo. There will be 3 boats coming, just get in. This is now obviously fucked. We are fucked. We are so fucked. Why the fuck are there 3 boats? Vincent and I are both pretty skinny guys. There's no way we could fight more than one person. It's the perfect kidnapping, I thought to myself. Vince and I are weak adults who come from apparent well-off families who didn't tell anyone where they were going or what they were doing. Gustavo knew all these things and obviously had the resources and connections to pull abduction off, or worse. I spot what appears to be a security guard making rounds down the beach a ways and immediately walk as fast as I can to him with Vincent. I explained, without using Gustavo's name, that we were supposed to be picked up by 3 boats, and we feel extremely uncomfortable after recent events and just want to pay the boat captain and leave. My hope was that if we get kidnapped, at least one person would know where the fuck we went or what happened to us. He assured to us that no boats come around this time and that we shouldn't wait too much longer. We walked not 100 feet before we get the single most chilling text I've ever read. Did you just talk to security? Vince and I both froze and stared at each other for a few seconds. We decided to reply and said we were just chatting with him and heading back, and we can't go anymore because it's too late. He quickly replied, "Don't worry, haha." We replied, "Seriously, don't send the boats, we're not going anymore." Once again his response was, "Don't worry, haha," followed yet by another, "Don't worry, haha," and that was the last we heard from him. I've seen the movies. Coke dealers don't usually treat rats very nicely. Maybe Gustavo knew that I didn't use his name, and maybe that's why we were able to get out of this mess. Was the security guard in on it too? Or were we being watched the whole time? I will never know. Not knowing what to do, Vincent and I started climbing the few hundred stairs up the mountain back to our room with purpose. It was dark now, with only the occasional dim lamp along the way. Every single sound, every single movement in the surrounding jungle scared the living shit out of us. I've never felt this scared in my whole entire life. We get back to my room, lock the door, and I go out on the patio to silently watch the easily climbable roofs like a fucking hawk. Vincent swears that he saw 2 hands on the edge of the roof, but they were gone when I pointed my phone's flashlight at them. For the next 2 hours I sat there, head on a swivel ready to fucking scream to wake up my family and fight for my life. While freaking the fuck out, I saw a meteor burn up in the clear night sky, which was easily the highlight of my night. So that was pretty cool, I guess. Eventually, we figured it was over and went to bed. Relieved to wake up in the morning without my throat slit, I relaxed a bit. Luckily, we were checking out the hotel at 11, so we wouldn't have to run into Gustavo again. Before leaving the resort, Vincent and I wandered down to the beach to kill some time. That's when 2 large native men that did not appear to work at the resort approached us. The larger one said, "Hey, are you the guys that were supposed to be on the boat last night, you know? Gustavo?" I replied, "No," trying my best to sound confused. "How much longer are you guys staying?" he asked. "We're leaving in an hour," I said. He looked at me with a "I know you're lying to me" face, held out his fist, grinned and said with a low voice, "Safe trip home." I bumped his fist and walked away, trying to stay cool. I felt like everyone who worked at the resort was looking at us and whispering about us for the next hour. I just wanted to get the fuck out. I didn't feel safe until we made the hour drive to the airport and got through security. Gustavo and your friends. Let's not meet again. Armed robbery at my college's campus. Okay, so this didn't happen to me, but I heard about it today from my grandmother. She keeps up with the news frequently and worries about me a lot. Apparently, a girl at my college's campus was sitting in her car at the parking garage, minding her own business when a random guy, presumably a student, walks up to her with a gun and demands she drives him to the nearest ATM to withdraw cash. After taking the cash, he demands that he be dropped back off at school. Really gives me creeps knowing this guy hadn't been caught yet and is still wandering around my school's campus. I'm left thinking, what if he's in one of my classes? What if I have my own creepy encounter with him? Scary shit. If anyone would like to link to the news article, comments below. My worst college experience. Okay, so a little background information before I go into things. I am currently a 20-year-old gay male living in Iowa. I'm a bigger set guy, and I've always struggled with depression and social phobia. This meant I didn't make friends very easily, and when I did make a friend, I was admittedly pretty clingy about them. By the time I got to college, this had mostly cleared up, but I still had some issues with it. Hopefully this will help explain some of my actions in the story. My first year of college, I decided to go to the opposite end of the state from where I grew up. I wanted to feel independent, and I thought the distance would help force me to break out of my shell some. I was very wrong. I immediately became even more depressed than I already was, and it only took about 2 weeks of living there to start having suicidal thoughts. It didn't help any that the guy who I'd been talking to and becoming friends with throughout the summer and was supposed to be living with in the dorms ended up not going to college, leaving me all alone in my dorm room. That is when I met Josh. Josh was another freshman on my floor, and after a brief conversation, I discovered he was bisexual. I immediately became attached to him, as I had no other friends at the time, and I felt like we had a lot in common. Before you ask, no, we never had sex. He really wasn't my type, and I didn't want to ruin our friendship with sex. Anyways, we became friends rather quickly, and about a month into college, Josh asked me if I wanted to move into a different dorm room and building with him, as neither of us could afford to have a single room, and he said he knew people in this other building that we could hang out with and not feel so secluded. Being a little naive, I agreed, and within a week, we had packed up and moved all our stuff into a different building. I didn't start having issues with Josh right away, but after a week or two, I started noticing some things that made me uncomfortable. I noticed numerous times that my movies and DVDs had been moved around, and sometimes even left out in the room without their cases. I am really protective of my DVD collection, and I wasn't alright with him using them without asking. I tried to bring this up with him, and he said he would stop, but he never did. I also noticed that I was being sexiled, as it's called many times. Usually about once a week I would be forced to leave my room for hours on end. Normally, I wouldn't have really cared, as I had no problem sitting in the dorm lounge until he got done, but he always chose it to do it fairly late at night, sometimes even after I went to bed. I am not a night person, and most of my classes were early in the morning, so I got really upset about this, and I did bring it up to him. Again, he said he would stop, but he never did. There were a couple of other things that I didn't really think much of at the time, but now that I'm not so sure how innocent they were. For instance, I had to buy underwear about 3 times in the few months that I was living with him. I didn't think much of it, as I knew that laundry rooms are notorious for having things stolen, especially in college. But looking back, I am not sure if they even got that far. Also, I remember him having a real obsession with horror movies. At first, this was great, because I'm a huge horror fan myself, but he preferred gore films. While I preferred the film to have good story and atmosphere, he used to watch gory films like Saw and more all the time, and I vaguely remember waking up one night to see him touching himself while watching the remake of I Spit on Your Grave. At first I wrote it off as him scratching his leg, but now I am not so sure. Another issue that I had was that, while he would kick me out of the room about once a week so we could have sex, I was never allowed. Every time I asked him, he just complained about having a lot of homework he needed to work on, and that he hated doing it anywhere but in his room. I tried to ignore it, but he wouldn't even let me have some alone time to pleasure myself. Whenever I would get started, he would always seem to walk into the room and told me to keep going, and he would just ignore me and listen to music. But I don't think he ever did. Like I said, these were little things, but they started to get to me. So before Thanksgiving break, I decided to look for a new roommate. I ended up finding one, and had signed all the papers needed for me to switch rooms, but I had to wait until the end of the semester. This wasn't an issue with me, and I told Josh about this, and he seemed to take things just fine. Thanksgiving break came and went. It was only about 4 days, but it was a much-needed escape from college, and it was nice to see my family again. When I got back, though, I found that my roommate hadn't left campus for break like he said he was going to. I also found out that he had taken all of my stuff, even the things in the closet and the drawers, and had thrown them into a giant pile in the middle of the dorm room. He had even gone so far as to buy new clothes put in my old closets so that I didn't have room for my own. I complained to him and remind him that I wasn't moving out for another 3 weeks, but he simply said that he didn't care and that if I was going to leave, that he might as well help me a little bit. This wasn't the last straw, however, and I still stayed there for another week, that is, until he pushed me past my limits. My last night in that room, I had asked him if I could have the room to myself for a few hours, as I wanted to Skype my long-distance boyfriend and would prefer if it was private. He didn't seem upset about it, and grabbed some homework in his laptop and left the room. 2 hours later, at about 10 p.m., I finished my Skype conversation, and I texted him saying he could come back to the room anytime he wanted. I stayed up for 2 more hours browsing the internet, but he never came back to the room. I didn't think anything of it, and simply went to bed. At about 2 or 3 in the morning, I was suddenly woken up by the sound of death metal music blaring so loud in my room that my RA halfway down the hall was woken up by it, followed shortly by a really loud bang as someone slammed the door shut. I got up and shut off the music, finding a CD of Josh's in a CD player, and at first didn't think much of it, until I saw he had left a note as well. Next time, don't treat your roommates like shit, or else you won't wake up at all. That was the last I could take. I had done nothing to him that would be considered treating him like shit, and I was terrified about the threat that he had given me. I called campus security, and they came out and took my statements. But since Josh wasn't there, and hadn't done anything illegal, they couldn't do anything. The officer just advised that I stayed in a friend's room for the night, and that I move out of the room as soon as possible. I told my RA and the head of the dorm building the situation, and they gave me permission to start moving the next day. I didn't have any other issues with Josh after I left. But the story doesn't end there. About halfway through the next semester, I walked into the main lobby of the dorm building and saw Josh with all his stuff next to him, and he was talking to a couple of police officers. No campus security, actual police officers, one of which never took his hand off of his gun the entire time in which he was around Josh. At first, I just laughed and figured he had gotten in some sort of trouble that I thought he deserved. That is until I got brought into the dorm office the next day to talk to a couple of officers. They asked me a couple questions about Josh, like why did I stop living with him as a roommate, if I knew anything about him using any kind of illegal substances, or if I ever knew him to be a violent individual. I told him everything that I told all of you, and that when we were living together he did smoke marijuana now and then, but I really didn't care as I have no issues with people who smoke pots. I don't do it myself, mind you, but I also don't believe it to be an illegal substance. Anyways, I asked them why I was being questioned, and what they said made my heart drop into my stomach. Apparently, Josh was into using a lot more than just weed. He apparently had started using cocaine, meth, and even some heroin at some point in his short college life. About a week ago, Josh had apparently used heroin and ended up severely attacking another student in one of his classes. He smashed his face with a heavy textbook, and apparently he also stabbed him with a pencil before running out of the class. When he got back to the dorm, he completely trashed the place. He ended up breaking his TV, his gaming systems, DVDs, CDs, even the college chairs, desks, and the windows, all of which belonged to the dorm building and not to him. He also took some more drugs and ended up overdosing, meaning he had to go to the hospital for an entire week until he was better. When he got out, he was banned from the campus, and the police were there to make sure he had gotten off of the premises before midnight, or else they were going to arrest him. Luckily, he didn't have a roommate when all this happened, so no one else but the student from his class ended up getting hurt. Still, part of me wonders what could have happened if I had still been his roommate and had been home during this incident. Would he have attacked me as well? Am I lucky to even be alive right now? I never saw or heard from Josh ever again, and I am beyond glad about this. I have since moved back to my hometown, and I'm going to school here, and I have yet to have any other major problems like this when it comes to college. But I still wonder what could have happened if I hadn't gone out of there when I had. So Josh, the roommate who made my first semester of college a living hell, let's never meet again.